Robert Plank Show, episode 127. Go from idea to finished physical product with Filip Valica. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Robert Plank Show. Today's guest is Filip Valica, and he's the founder of The Product Startup, a site that provides a step-by-step blueprint to aspiring product creators wanting to bring their ideas to market. Through interviews with successful small business owners, inventors, and Shark Tank winners, he explores the intersection of his interests and experience, which is do-it-yourself product development. So Filip, glad to have you on the show today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the show, Robert.
Cool. So in addition to like what we just kind of talked about, what is it exactly that you do?
So, by day, I'm a mechanical engineer and an engineering manager, and I work for companies to help take their products to market. Right? And then at night, I turn into a superhero you've never heard of to help other people kind of do the same with their own personal ideas.
Cool. So like with who and with what?
So, in my day job, I work with most of the companies I work with are in oil and gas, and some are in like utilities and emergency vehicles. And so, when I first got out of school, I worked for IBM, and then I worked for a really tiny company. And so, I went from working with like a 300,000 person company to like a mom and pop of 20 people. And that 20-person company developed these products for they basically connect to the engine of a emergency vehicle and create a ton of electrical power to power like the jaws of life or other types of tools that a firefighter might use to get you out of a car.
So that's cool. So you take like your mechanical engineering knowledge and someone has an idea and you help them get it out there, get it patented, all that good stuff.
In a way, so I'm doing it on my website, and I'm not working with individuals right now. It's just a site where I put a bunch of information. It was a labor of love, so you could say. Our daughter was born about 16 months ago, and the day that she was born, I realized that what, if I don't get off my rear end and follow my passion and do something, then I'm gonna wake up one day and she'll be in college and I'll be regretful. And so that day I basically started working on creating a bunch of content for a site, and I launched the site in January of this year. And then I created a podcast in March where I interview people that have been able to turn their ideas into products themselves. And yeah, the rest is history, so to speak. It's really just an information-based site and a place where you can go to find how to take the next step if that's what you're looking to do.
Well, cool. So let's talk a little bit about that. So as far as the site that you created and the content that you've created yourself, plus the guests that you have on, what's like the most interesting, I guess, like topic or case study that kind of comes to mind right now?
Yeah, so I think most people will write in and say, "Hey, I've had this really cool idea, and I don't know how to take it to market, or what's the next step that I need to take. I've got a sketch of something, and maybe I need to go and patent it, but what do I do?" And to them, it's probably the same thing that you guys have talked about in your other episodes. It's you really want to test your idea as quickly as you can. So, creating a concept prototype and validating the market, validating the customers. And there's a process of all of this on the site for free for anyone to go up there and look. Um, and then kind of iterate. So if you've got a bunch of ideas, you do that to all your ideas, and the ones with the most promise will kind of float to the top.
So that and is that something that you commonly recommend someone to do to have multiple ideas going, just all kind of pushed up to that finish line or whatever? I guess that way they don't have all their eggs in one basket.
In a way, so if we look at the process, so what I did, I'm going to take one step back really quick so I can explain myself. So when I worked for small companies and really big companies and corporations, I noticed that they were kind of taking the same path to market, even though they used different names and they had different tools and different processes. They pretty much followed the same steps. And so all this site is a place where you can find out what those steps are and what's typically done during that step. I go into some detail about how you can do that step yourself if you want, and then you can also decide if you want to hire somebody. There's some links there. Again, no affiliation to any of these companies where you can kind of get more information. But it's just basically it's a roadmap. And so you asked about is it better to have a whole lot of ideas so you don't have all your eggs in one basket? I think the when you first start the process, you might have more than one idea, and some people have tons of ideas. Others have problems coming up with maybe even one. Uh, but there, you need to be able to kind of taper it down so you're not spending all your time in 5 or 10, 15 directions. And the way that companies do this is this systematic process where they add a little bit of value, a little bit of work, and then reevaluate it. It's like a guess and check type method. It's iterative. So every couple steps, you're validating something. You're validating the market, you're validating your customers, or you're validating the product. That way, you're not going off on a tangent by yourself, and then all of a sudden you wake up and no one's there with you, right? Your product has no audience.
Oh yeah, if you just created it in a vacuum and then no one understands me.
Right, right.
So you mentioned a little bit there like that there are some steps. Are there a lot of steps, or is it something that you're able to list out for us real quick here?
Yeah, and yes and yes, right? So there are a lot of steps only because there's about 14 steps only because I believe in breaking things down into small bite-sized pieces. It's kind of that age-old question, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite
One
at a
bite at
time.
a time. Yep.
And so I'm not a fan of just people saying, hey, there's these only 3 steps to getting a product to market. All you have to do is design it, make it, and sell it. I just gave you like zero information, right?
Right.
So there's, and I don't want to necessarily bore the listeners here by listing out all 14 steps, but basically you go from getting the idea to creating prototypes to designing for manufacture, funding it, making it, marketing, selling, and shipping. And there's some intermediate steps there depending on if you want to get patents and how complicated the design is, but it's very logical step by step so you know when you read it, hey, this is what step I'm on, and then this is what maybe I haven't done that I need to go back and do.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, so you know where you're at right now and what's the next step for you, or if you need to go back and go fix something.
Yep, absolutely.
So, I mean, have you gone through this process not just with working with other companies, but have you gone through this process like for your own idea?
Yes, so I've got a couple ideas that I'm working on now. I've had some more time lately where I've been able to invest them in my like working on a side project and some products, and so I'm testing it by going through that. Most of the small companies that I've worked for have followed this procedure, I guess, these types of steps, again, by different names. So it's not anything that's necessarily new, but people that read the blueprint or these processes should be able to kind of pick up what it is just by looking at it. Now, of course, once you start diving into the detail, some of these steps can take a couple of days or a week, and some can take months to complete.
Okay, and so is this so you're in fact actually like making a product that I mean, what's the goal with this product? What are you building towards?
Yeah, so the goal for me is to create multiple products so I can have multiple revenue streams from the products themselves. Basically, mini companies, if you will. So a couple products would be part of one company and maybe some others under another. So small brands that have something in common. For example, I have a furniture product that just launched on Amazon that I didn't really design or create myself. I just private labeled. I don't know if you know much about private labeling.
A little bit, like go on Alibaba, go contact them, buy the minimum order, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so something like that, except I kind of tweaked the design a bit and I took it a step further. I bought an entire 20-foot container of product that I had custom designed or tweaked, I should say, for what I was looking for. And then I shipped it to Amazon. And that main goal of that was just to test the process of contacting a manufacturer and then having Amazon fulfill it. Because those are the parts of the process that were most foreign to me. Again, because most of the work that I've done was working in the U.S. with small companies that have manufacturing based in the U.S. And I've definitely done the cradle to grave here. I just didn't know how it kind of fit into the Amazon model.
And that's pretty cool that you were able to tweak something because I mean the only two avenues I'd heard about were like you said the private label where you just go in and find something that's already made or that other process which it seems like it might take a while, right? Like for someone to design something, especially if patenting's involved. So it seems like what you did there with the furniture product that was kind of a little bit of a shortcut there, right? So that you kind of had an idea of what you wanted to make, but then instead of having to go one extreme or the other, you just kind of got the parts and assembled it, I guess. Is that right?
No, absolutely. And so that's the nice thing about this DIY product development blueprint that I throw up there is that you can, if you feel that all the other previous steps have been done for you, for example, a private labeled product that already has a market that's been tested, you get to skip all those steps until you hit the part where you're designing for manufacturer or wherever you need to go next. So it's kind of flexible in that way. And I want to touch on another thing that you said where I was able to tweak the design. In my opinion, you could do that with most products. I think you can go back to the manufacturer and say, "Hey, listen, this is what I would like to change with it." Now, whether they come back to you with a number that you agree with is a different story. But there's always room for that change. You just need to have that conversation with them and see what the minimum upfront cost is and that type of thing.
That's kind of interesting. That's a whole nother world I didn't even know about. So you mentioned on your site and then a few places that a part of what you do either I mean or you can do at least with teaching people what to do this. You can teach people how to get on the TV show Shark Tank. Is that right?
Yeah, and so I loosely say that just because a lot of the people that I have on my podcast have been previous Shark Tank winners, and the process that they take to get there is similar to if you were launching your own product. Instead of looking for funding from friends and family, now you're looking for funding from the sharks.
And
So
oh,
no, sorry. The only thing I was going to say for that is the sharks probably have the same or similar requirements to making sure that your product ideas are vetted and that you've validated your customer needs and you've done some upfront design and maybe you've even pre-sold some orders or made some sales. They have those types of requirements, just like maybe any other investor that you'd run into.
and then so in order for someone to, for example, get on a show like that, what would they have to do?
Yeah, so I think Shark Tank is special just because it's also on TV, so there's that added component. A lot of the people that you speak with that have been on the show will say the first few rounds, and there's three last I talked to somebody. The first 2 or 3 rounds are based on your likability, the ability for other people to pick up the phone and call for you, or to switch the channel on and watch you, your ability to connect to other people in the audience. And so it's definitely it's a TV show, so it's a ratings game, right?
Right.
The other part of the equation is what happens when you get through that third round and now the producers signed off on your likability and you're sitting in front of the sharks. Now you need to have a viable product slash business. And I say business is because lately, or many of the products that have been founded have been around existing businesses that have the capability to grow. Many of them, and again, I hate to use generalities because there's definitely some products that don't follow this mold. Many of the products aren't just one-hit wonders. They have the ability to create other product lines instead of just variations. In other words, it's not just a different size or color or a copy of that product that does something just slightly different. It's a whole nother avenue, or it's a new line of type of product. So it needs to be developed, and they need to be able to see that it has legs. And usually what that means is that you've got money or revenue coming in.
Okay. So they're looking for some very specific things there.
As far as I can understand, it's really hard to say what idea will succeed or fail just based on looking at it, because they definitely have their own numbers involved, and you've got every shark's personal preference that they take certain types of products. And I don't watch the show religiously, so I don't want to get caught in a lie here. But a lot of the people that I've had on that were successfully able to take money from the sharks and partner with them were people that knew what they were doing. They understood their market. They had a really good product with an idea that just needed to be amplified. That you need to turn up the dial a little bit. It's not necessarily a product or an idea that you need someone else to put in a ton of work to validate or to make to become real. And that's and so if you didn't listen to anything that I've said the entire episode, I will say that there's very few people that will give you money for an idea.
That's huge right there. So what you're saying is so for someone to be on Shark Tank, for example, then aside from all the other things that that there's been a certain amount of market research, a certain amount of likability. What you're saying is that if that was someone's goal, that or if they were looking for the right fit, then that would only be if they were just at the point where they're ready for more money, but most of the work's already done by the time they're on that show. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much like in other words, if money is holding you back from scaling, that's probably a good fit for you. If you need money to make you successful, then that's a whole other question, and that's probably something that they don't want to get involved in.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess so. This whole Shark Tank thing, that's like I guess that's one avenue, and I guess another avenue, like you said, is someone can go on Amazon, someone can get a supplier and private label or re-engineer something, and then put it on Amazon. Is there any other kind of avenues someone should be taking if they have a product or they're making a product and they're looking to sell it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could either so the standard model is manufacturing it yourself or outsourcing the manufacturer, and you're basically wrapping a business around it where you're fulfilling it yourself. You're handling the customer service, or again, you're outsourcing it depending on your skill set, and that's the base model. And many of the people that I have on the show have gone that route. They've got 1 to 5 employee small businesses where they've been in business for 3 to 5 years or whatever. They go to the trade shows, they do the online marketing, and they do the fulfillment through their website, and they ship wholesale as well as retail. So I guess that's the bread and butter. That's what people assume is the normal path. I would say the Amazon private labeling or the Amazon fulfillment path is maybe a fringe. Um, and then there's also licensing, where you don't want to deal with any of that. All you want to do is say, here's my idea. Who's going to give me a percent of the revenue for it?
And that seems kind of cool. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get myself into trouble by getting into too much detail because I'm an engineer and I am not a licensing lawyer or attorney, and I haven't been involved in a lot of these cases. But basically, that involves taking your intellectual property to a company that's highly likely to make your product and make it real, that has these connections in retail and the supply chain that you're looking for. So, for example, if you have a special tool that helps somebody around the house to do a DIY project, you would go into a Home Depot or a Lowe's and look at other tools that are similar to yours, find the manufacturer of those tools, and then contact those manufacturers to say, hey, look, I've got this great idea that you need to start making. And here's a sell sheet. It's basically a sheet that has a concept of the idea and all the benefits for the consumer, and any detail that you can offer, and hope that they bite. Now, the strength of your deal is determined by a lot of factors, including the market it's in, the industry, the how much upfront work you've done. Do you already have an audience for it, or are you just putting something up in the air, that type of thing. So it could be anywhere from 3 to 10% of the revenue.
Okay, but that still seems like, I mean, what's cool about everything I've been hearing today is that there are a lot more options than I previously thought, as far as like you said, even just the licensing part of it, or the combining different things together to make your Amazon product, or selling it on their own website. So it seems like no one's really locked into just one single avenue to take with all this.
Yeah, and I'm heavily biased, right? I'm really hands-on. I love doing DIY stuff. That's why it's DIY product development. I just get in there. I roll up my sleeves, then I do it because I enjoy it. And I understand that doesn't fit everybody. But the nice thing is, especially now in today's world where you have all these technologies that enable you to do all these things, funding is one step on that model. The crowdfunding hasn't been as big as it is today, in forever. Crowdfunding is based in like an 1800s model where people got together when there weren't as many taxes, and they built to get things that the community needed. And there have been other advances in like prototyping and all sorts of other things to enable you to do things by yourself that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. E-commerce has just blown up in the last 5 or 10 years, not in terms of the market share only and compared to retail, but I mean in terms of the tools that are available to you and me to be able to sell something without any experience.
Oh yeah, I mean I agree. So with all that stuff, all the tools and all the platforms and all those things available to everyone, what's the big mistake you see everyone making everywhere still?
Oh gosh, big mistake is that you never validate your market, your consumer. You skip a step and you go off into the design phase where you're starting to spend money, or you go into protecting your IP, like getting a patent. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. Asterisks. Um, there's something called a provisional patent, so you don't have to spend a whole tons of money. It's a provisional patent application that you fill out that gives you a year to put patent pending on your idea, so you can develop it. um, don't spend a ton of money up front, bottom line, to validate your idea before it has legs. The worst case you can get into is that now you owe all this money to manufacturers, to people that are creating your prototypes, and there's nobody that wants to buy your baby. And you get so invested because you've rushed through all these steps before validating, that now it has to work, and you get really desperate, and it's tough to make decisions that are logical at that point.
Oh no, because you're just in like panic mode at that point. And so do you think that's just because maybe it's like an ego kind of thing? Maybe someone says my product has just got to work, so I'm just gonna go forward with that.
Gosh, there's so many things. People that are their own customers can get blinders. If you develop something for yourself, which is, by the way, a really good way to get ideas, is if you see that there's a need for it because you need it in your own life. Chances are someone else might need it too. Uh, those types of people usually make the mistake of not validating that, or not getting other input. But it could be as innocuous as you know you haven't really there's so many ideas that you could run with, that you just picked one without bringing any data into it, and it it's not a more ego thing. It's just you just haven't done the steps or the work.
Okay, fair enough. And I mean, yeah, like it's like if people want to have a business, then it would make sense if they had, you know, logical business steps as opposed to just kind of winging it, I guess.
Well, because it's just so hard to make a decision if there's no roadmap or a game plan for you. It's easy to skip a step because it's not fun. It's not fun to go out there and talk to people who will tell you no, that your idea stinks. It's not fun to go research and one of the early steps is to validate your market. And that's when you see, for example, do you need any type of certification or testing for your product? How big is the market? And people sometimes skip that step, and then 6 steps later you realize you need FDA approval, and it's 25 grand and takes a year or two. uh, that's a tough pill. But
Yeah, scary stuff.
it's not the fun part though, because the fun part is making the prototype, or it's get contacting manufacturers, or creating the logo, or whatever you deem to be really fun. And so you skip some of the other steps because whatever, I'll get back to it. And in reality, you're just compounding the problem, because now you're just getting more invested into the idea, and it's because it becomes really hard to say no to it later.
Right. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, it seems like that's a pretty easy trap to fall into if they don't have the right advice and the right guidance and stuff. So, could you tell us about your website and your podcast and about all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and so I really appreciate you having me on. I'm definitely not going to be one of those people that says, "Oh, well, if you don't follow my plan, you're doomed." There's so many ways of going about going to market. I present one way. It's worked for me. It's worked for the companies that I've worked for. I have a certain type of, again, hands-on, just get into it. That may not be you, um, but if you go on theproductstartup.com, you can find step-by-step blueprint that you can follow to help kind of turn your ideas into physical products. And I also have a podcast where I interview other successful people that have done this. And so you don't have to take my word for it as an engineer. There's people that haven't had that experience that have put $5,000 in, and they have physical product-based businesses that you can just listen to them and learn and see what they did.
Awesome. Well, sounds like lots of good advice and lots of good stories there at theproductstartup.com. So thanks so much, Philip, for stopping by the show and telling us all about making a product.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Robert. I really appreciate it.
robertplank.com/iTunes. Be sure to subscribe.